So this is the site of the venue of the Shia Horse. And what happened there?
So yeah, this is the famous Shia Horse. It's a build now. It's a little housing estate, and the back of the club was just there, and then the back of the club connected to this field here. So I mean, this is really bringing back some memories here.
Yeah. But you were DJing here, weren't you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I DJ'd here for years. It was a very violent place at the time. It used to be carnage here every weekend, just here.
Right.
Afterwards, there'd be fights almost every weekend here. And the fights would continue going down the Stennock.
Right.
And there were times where I walked down the Stennock about 2 in the morning, and there was people laid out unconscious on the floor, and they weren't drunk, they'd been beaten unconscious.
Who was fighting?
Well, I knew pretty much every gangster and drug dealer in the area.
Right.
And so it was over rival drugs, things like that. Remember one time there was a police raid here, and all the paddy wagons pulled in, and everyone was sitting around smoking weed, and they all rushed in, and there was a lot of police, and they arrested a lot of people.
Yeah.
And afterwards there was just, I didn't get arrested, but I was walking around, there was drugs everywhere, all over the floor, and people had thrown it on the floor. Yeah, and it was, like I said, I knew pretty much every major drug dealer and gangster who used to come here. But this was in the 90s. This was just the fighting. It was before all the knives and the guns.
Yeah. So all the people fighting, they were all fighting over the drug turf wars, and they all got into each other.
Yeah, pretty much. And as far as I know, I was the only person that carried a pistol back then.
Really? What kind of pistol?
A Beretta.
Yeah.
That I tucked in my jeans.
Yeah.
And there was another guy, he was like a sidekick, and he carried a pistol as well. And he was obsessed with paramilitarism, this guy. And the thing is, though, it doesn't mean you're an evil person because you carry a pistol.
No.
It was very much a defense mechanism.
Mm.
It was a survival mechanism because what had happened in Reading,
Yeah.
which I'll talk about when we go back to Zena. In the States, places where everyone carries pistols, certain places, there's a very low crime rate.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I was an evil person because I carried a pistol. Most people who know me have described me as a kind, loving person.
Mm.
And but yeah, like I say, it was a defense, it was a survival mechanism, defense mechanism.
Oh yeah. So
Crime Watch.
Crime Watch. Yeah. How did you guess? You must be psychic. What was it one of my daughters said to me the other day? Body from Baywatch, face from Crime Watch. So the guys that were involved with these drug feuds, were they predominantly from St Ives or?
All over Cornwall, all over West Cornwall.
Yeah.
Red Roof, Newlyn.
Yeah.
There was biker gangs from Newlyn. Well,
Right.
the Scorpions.
The Scorpions?
Yeah. Some of them. And yeah.
Well, they would come on their bikes.
No, they would just turn up in cars.
Turn up, yeah.
But they would wear their biker gear. But yeah. But this was the time, this was back in the 90s, it was still fighting, fist fighting.
Yeah.
It was before all the knives
Sure.
and the guns. And like
Yeah.
I say, I was the only person who carried a pistol.
Yeah. But you had martial arts training as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And like my sidekick, he carried a pistol as well. And he, like I say, he was obsessed with paramilitarism.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the back of the club there.
Right.
and it went onto the field here.
I guess they must have had raves in the field as well.
Sometimes it was so popular back in the 90s. Say that was the club there. There was queues
Really?
all the way down to the other houses there.
Yeah. So
But
people-
those other houses weren't there.
Right.
All it was a huge club,
Yeah.
which probably started at the back and went down 2 or 3 houses down.
Yeah.
You know, it was big. Yeah, and the big dance floor was at the front. The smaller dance floor was at the back. And yeah, the huge queues every weekend.
And you had to pay to get in.
Yeah, and it was. But yeah, afterwards it was carnage every weekend. Just fighting in the car park, and then the fights would carry on down the Stenhope. You know, and like I say, I walked down there sometimes, and there was people unconscious.
Yeah.
They'd been beaten unconscious and were lying in the road,
Yeah.
not from alcohol.
Yeah.
So,
Mainly weed, was it?
what was it back then? It was like ecstasy, LSD. But it's all changed now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
That's a slice of history here. It's very suburban now.
Oh, it's completely changed. That's the thing, you see. What's interesting is that back in the 90s, it was you had to work very hard to get arrested. It was.
Hello.
It's all right, are you
I-
filming?
I
Are you
would-
filming?
Well, we're just doing an ad hoc. Hello, Louise.
Hello, hi.
Another bit of what's the
Oh,
word?
sorry,
Synchronicity.
Sorry, my glass. I
We're
take my
talking
glasses
about
off.
where
Those
the
on.
old nightclub, the Shirehorse, used to be here.
Really?
In the 90s, it was a very
Oh.
popular nightclub. And it used to
Amazing.
be just right here.
Oh.
We're talking
And
about
don't
that.
don't put me on there.
Okay, I won't. I won't.
No, that's great. How are you?
I'm good. Just bumped into someone driving past who are new, and yeah, wrapping it up, James.
Yeah, so back in the 90s, what is very interesting is that you had to work really hard to get arrested back then. What I mean by that is it was the Blair and Brown government. It was more left-leaning. And later on, the area became like everywhere became a playground for the rich. Because when the Tories came in, and then it completely flipped over. You could be arrested at a drop of a hat,
Yeah,
and we're still feeling the effects of that now.
sure.
So it went from one extreme to the other. It was and
So when you were here in the 90s, there was all this trouble and mayhem. Were people getting nicked, or were they just getting warnings?
no, people weren't getting arrested for it. No one was getting arrested for it. No one was getting imprisoned for it.
Yeah.
This is my point.
Mm.
It was under the Blair and the Brown government, which you had to work really hard to get arrested,
Yeah.
and then it turned into a playground for the rich. You could be arrested and imprisoned for anything
Yeah.
at the drop of the
We're
hat.
doing a social media post.
Yep, and we're still feeling the effects of that.
Mm.
So it went from one extreme to the other.
Good stuff. We're back in the peace and quiet of Zena with James Casbolt again. I think you're going to chat about what happened in Reading, James.
Yeah, it was what happened in Reading was what led up to the events we were talking about in St Ives. I know Jan Rodrigo mentions a little bit of it. He didn't really go into detail in Basis 24, and he said that I'd come down to St Ives because I had a little, well, what did he say? A bit of trouble
Right.
in Reading, and that's very much putting it mildly. A bit of trouble. I was basically being ferried from the Battle Hospital to the RBH, back and forth, having my body rebuilt after a series of assaults,
Right.
which I wanted to give some feedback to Sophia as well,
Yeah.
because she mentioned what happened in Tilehurst, and she mentioned the RBH and Battle Hospital,
And what was the RBH?
the Royal Berkshire Hospital.
Okay, so you were at that time 12 or 13,
Yeah, 12, 13, yeah.
and Sophia was a little bit older. And you both lived in Tolhurst Road.
Yeah, so if you look at it on the Google Maps, Tilehurst, where I lived, Recreation Road is here. Where Sophia lived on Oakview was here. And Deanfield School was at the top here. And then you got to Deanfield from Oakview up Dark Lane.
Yeah.
And then there's a kind of boundary on the maps where it goes green, just to the side of Deanfield and Oakview, which is, you're going deep into the Berkshire countryside there.
Right.
So Sophia lived closer to Deanfield than me. I lived further
Yeah.
away. And the parade of shops that she mentioned, that was at the top of Recreation Road. And that's where a lot of the gang stuff
Right.
started, at that parade of shops.
Yeah. So these were local gangs in Reading.
They were older than me. I was young, I was 12 or 13. They were older. You know, I was very much outnumbered.
Yeah.
The first time when I was a kid on Recreation Road, I got surrounded by a gang, and they were just about to get me, and we were next to a car, and I jumped over the car and slid across the bonnet of the car and slipped out between them and got away. But things escalated from there. The first time I was hospitalised, I mean, this was a series of serious assaults back to back, where they were so serious I was paid thousands of pounds in compensation
Right.
for it.
Was there any reason why they were targeting you?
That's one of the $1 million questions. There was like robberies going on. If you went to London and got like cool clothes and things like that, and you were involved in the dance competitions, and you kind of stood out a bit. You were popular, but at the same time, you were being targeted for, you know, standing out.
Yeah.
And,
So you'd get like beaten with fists and things like that.
well, what the first one was, I was ended up lying on my back, and someone jumped up in the air and came down with all their weight on their knee on my face, and they basically crushed my nose and pushed my nose over to the side of my face. So I had to go under general anaesthetic and have facial reconstruction surgery to put all that back together. And that was the first time. Then the second one, the second thing happened. It carried on because some of the people I was kind of had conflict with went to Deanfield.
Right.
So the when I snapped my arm, that actually happened on the back field behind Deanfield. We were at school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a strange day actually, because I'd got in trouble, and the teachers had made me go out and pick litter up in at the back of the school, and I remember falling over. I tripped over and landed, and there was a crushed can on the floor, and the can stuck in my hand. And it was strange. Yeah, the can stuck deeply in my hand and really cut my hand.
Yeah.
And so I took it out, carried on, and then two guys who I'd fallen out with at the parade of shops a couple of nights before, that Sophia mentioned, they approached me, and one of them banged me in the face, and then we got into this big long fight, and it was, you know, there was loads of people crowded round us, and you know, this went on for a while, and again I got my nose broken the second time. I got all cut, split open around my eyebrows, and basically what happened, I had one of them in a headlock, and the other guy kicked me in the back, and we all fell forward, all three of us, with all the weight landed on my arm.
Yeah.
And it snapped those two bones. And you know, but the school didn't, you know, my arm was like this, that bit was straight and that bit was over here.
Yeah.
So you would have thought they would have called the ambulance for me, you know, but they didn't.
They didn't.
No.
Do you think? I mean, they had a drug problem with these older boys at the school, presumably.
The drugs weren't really had come in at that point.
Yeah.
You know, this was late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
This was just still the street fighting.
Right.
And but they didn't call an ambulance. They called my mother
Yeah.
to take me to hospital. Maybe, you know, they were worried about legal issues or something like that. So that was RBH.
Right. And that was a mixed school because Sophia went there as well, didn't she?
Yeah, it was a mixed school. Yeah, and there was a lot of Jamaican kids there, Caribbean kids, and you know, there was definitely quite a lot of racial tension, I would say, there.
Yeah.
And so then I had the surgery done at RBH, Royal Berkshire Hospital, so I was getting ferried back between Battle Hospital and Royal Berkshire Hospital, and I had my arm rebuilt. I just had my face reconstructed. And so then my arm was in a cast. I had the metal plates put in, and then it still carried on the violence. You know, I had to fight with one arm.
Right.
In Thailand, I was carried on street fighting. The gang, like one of them, I had my headphones in. It was like 10 o'clock. I was walking down Dart Street at the end of Recreation Road, and he like punched the earphone into my ear.
Right.
So I'm having to fight with one arm now. You know, like very violent street fights. And the last one, this was like kind of the final straw, was at Caversham. We were at the fun fair near Washington Heights. You got the bridge.
Yeah.
And Washington Heights is just across from the bridge. And there was me and a friend. We got into a street fight with like a gang of about 5. And then that was the first fight. My coat got pulled up over my face, so I was like trapped in my coat like this. And I couldn't breathe, and my arms were trapped.
Yeah.
And I was like getting my head stomped on. And then that fight finished, and we walked across the bridge to from Caversham. We were walking to Washington Heights, and then we looked behind us, and there was a gang of like 30, 40 people chasing us, you know, to carry it on. So we started running, and it was starting to get dark now, and we almost made it to Washington Heights, but we got caught under the bridge just before Washington Heights.
Yeah.
And then there was like 15, 20 people, you know, against me and this other person, and we were trying to fight, but obviously we just ended up on the floor getting our like faces stomped on. And this went on for quite a while. And then he kind of carried me outside Washington Heights, and I sat there, and all my memories from like, I was like 12, 13, the years leading up to that, they all started to disappear. Like my personality and all my memories just started to disappear. And I said to my friend, I'm losing my memories. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I kept repeating, I can't remember, I can't remember. Like that. And again, Mum turned up, poor Mum. And I was hospitalised in RBH again. And they said that when I went in, they said he's got a fractured skull. Like that. But then they came back and they said, it was a bit confusion. They said, no, he hasn't got a fractured skull. But they were sure that I did have a fractured skull, and all of a sudden I didn't. And again, my face got smashed up quite severely, you know. And
Presumably that's why you then got taken out of that Reading situation, moved to St Ives.
that's what Jan was talking about. He said, you know, I'd had a bit of trouble, and I'd come to St Ives and to Draycott Terrace, and I'd moved in above Jan. Jan lived in the flat below. So
Was that like a privately owned house, or were you renting it? Or?
no, my father was renting it. It was on Draycott Terrace. It wasn't very nice inside. It was quite run down, but it had a really nice view over
Yeah.
Minster Beach.
Yeah.
And then I got friendly with the guy I was talking about, who was obsessed with paramilitarism. And you know, I wouldn't say we were evil carrying pistols. I would say that was a defense mechanism because
Yeah.
of what happened.
Because there was a bit of gang warfare going on even in St Ives, wasn't there?
Yeah, when I first came down, I hadn't got a pistol yet, but my room in Reading was like an armoury on Recreation Road. I had like pretty much every weapon from the martial arts shop.
Yeah.
You know, nunchuckers, swords and things like that. But I was too young to buy all the bladed weapons. And Jean Greer, who I've talked about in Agent Buried Alive, she's from Brighton, she died. And she played a major role in all this. I used to get her to go to the martial arts shop and buy the knives and things for me. And buy little pens that you take the top off and it was a blade on the top of the pen. And my bedroom was like an armory. It was just like Death Stars, knives, everything in there. And the first time I come down to St Ives, within the first week, I was talked up. I had a lot of weapons like nunchuckers and things like that. And a gang approached me, and because I was new and I dressed differently, and they'd heard some stories about me. I think one of them banged me in the face. This was on the seafront in St Ives, and I pulled out the nunchuckers and hit him full blast and knocked across the jaw, knocked him out. And then my dad turned up, Peter Casbolt. He drove along the seafront, and there was all these people there, and he was like, look, he's just had loads of trouble in Reading. He wants to sort of recover from that. And then one of the guys opened the door and banged me in the face, and I unclipped my seatbelt and tried to jump out to fight them all, and Dad grabbed me, pulled me back in the car, and we drove off. So the violence was continuing.
Yeah.
There was kind of, and then
I wonder how they knew about Reading, you know, the kids in St Ives.
it was just school. They'd heard stories that I'd come down from, and they'd heard about what had happened, and I was quite popular. There was a lot of people wanting to befriend me, and that because I was like into hip hop and I had all the latest records and things like that. And the kids in Cornwall didn't really know about that culture much, because Reading was just outside London. And then I had my friend who I mentioned, like kind of my sidekick, and then we started to get armed properly then with pistols. And then it led on to the armed robbery, which was discussed in the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
If you want a little break, and we can maybe talk about that.
Yeah. So you were going to, there is a newspaper article about the armed robbery that took place in Carbis Bay.
Yeah.
Which was shortly after all these incidences in St Ives. Do you just want to say something about that, James?
Yeah, so me and my friend, we decided we'd do our first armed robbery. We were about 14 and a half, in the spa in Carbis Bay. And it was Friday night. We'd gone there, and we had scarves around our face and hats on. So we were outside the spa, and my friend was like, look, this is a bad idea. Let's plan this out properly, and let's come back another time. And I was like, no, we've got to do it now. We can't come back. We've got to do it now. It's like now or never. And he goes, well, I'm not doing it. I goes, okay, I'll do it myself. And we used to listen to this rap band called Ghetto Boys from Texas, Houston, Texas, and our favourite rapper from the band was called Scarface. And I actually quoted a line from Scarface. I said, ain't nothing to it but to do it. And that was almost like an MK Ultra trigger or something. I said, ain't nothing to it but to do it, and ran into the store. And I looked back, and he just ran after me. And I gone in, I pulled out the pistol and I stuck it in the cashier's face, and she initially she said, "Is this a joke?" And I said, "No, it's not a fucking joke." And when she realised it was serious, all the colour drained out of her face, and she started trembling. She became unresponsive, and I was trying to get the cash out the till, but she was totally unresponsive. And my friend had got everyone to go to the customers to go to the back of the store at gunpoint, so that they were all being held at the back of the store at gunpoint. So I jumped over the counter myself, but I didn't know what button to press on the till to open it. And I started pressing all the buttons, and the alarm went off on the till. And when the alarm went off on the till, all the people at the back started screaming, and it just pandemonium broke out. And we just panicked and ran out the shop and ran home. And when we got home to Draycott Terrace, and a police armed response unit pulled up outside the house. So, and my father was there, Peter Casbolt. Obviously he's dead now. He hid the guns at the back of the flat in the bag, and we obviously thought, oh, they're going to come in. So this armed response unit ran out their cars and vans and ran into the house next door. And then they were in there for a while. We were looking out the window, and then they came out and drove off. And
They didn't come into your flat?
no, they went in next door.
Oh, why was that?
And they questioned the guy next door, because he'd had a couple of run-ins with the police.
That's a bit odd, isn't it? So you got
Very
away with
odd.
it, really? But you didn't, because you got nicked, didn't you? And it was in the paper.
Yeah, my girlfriend at the time, my dad was a policeman. And I told her,
And she told her, well,
Georgina, her name was.
Georgina.
Blonde Georgina from St Ives School. She was in the year below me.
Right.
Dad was a policeman. She lived in Carbis Bay. I told her. And yeah, got back to her dad. And then I got arrested in school. Police come.
In St Ives School?
Yeah, they come into school and arrested me. Yeah.
And then they presumably didn't send you to prison, but what, a young offenders place?
Yeah, Feltham, young offender.
Feltham?
Feltham.
Yeah, that was. I had some friends who went there.
Yeah.
Place to go to. That was rough, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very rough. It was very dangerous. 28 days I received.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And then you came back to St Ives School?
no, expelled.
You expelled
for
from
that.
school?
Yeah, well, I was expelled from Deanfield
Why were you expelled when you were getting like beaten up all the time?
because vandalism.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was completely off the rails by then.
Yeah.
And that I was in the special needs classes.
Mm.
You know, but I never had a low IQ. I've always been told I had a high IQ.
Yeah.
But you're completely off the rails, what had happened. And I don't know whether there's a cognitive decline, I don't know, or brain damage, I don't know, because I've completed a bachelor's degree in political science. So I wouldn't say there's cognitive decline, and I was told I could do a master's, possibly a PhD.
All right. Well, that'd be good. Was it Dr. Casbolt?
Yeah.
Like the sound of that?
If I keep that name.
Yeah.
Dr. Leoness.
Dr. Leoness, yeah, that's got a ring to it.
But, yeah, but I suffer from severe pain.
Yeah.
have severe facial pain,
Yeah.
and I've got a whole host of health
Mm.
issues.
Not surprising, really.
Yeah. So, am I the bad guy? Am I the good guy? Am I the offender? Am I the victim? Most people who know me would say I was the good guy, but describe me as always helpful, loving, kind person. Well, I don't know.
Okay, well, great chat, James, and to be continued.
Thanks, Bob.
So yeah, we were chatting in the garden after we stopped filming to talk a little bit about MK Ultra and why a lot of these kids are behaving the way they do. And then you mentioned you were sent to see a psychiatrist in near St Michael's Mount. Is that right?
Yeah, he lived in Marazine. He had a big house overlooking St Michael's Mount. Yeah, that's really big house. He was a psychiatrist. I used to go and see him every week, and this was around the time the armed robbery was. It was just after, and he would hypnotise me every weekend.
Right.
Yeah, and he'd sit there and he'd say, "We're going to get your subconscious mind working for you." And he goes, "If your subconscious mind is responding, your little finger will start to raise by itself on your left hand." And my little finger would go up.
Yeah.
And then I'd go deep. He'd put me deeper into the hypnosis, and whereas I couldn't remember, and then I'd wake up and it was, I don't know, half an hour later or something. I couldn't remember what had happened.
But he was able to put you under hypnosis.
Yeah, he put me under because he said that if you're going under, your finger will start to raise on your left hand, your little finger will start to raise by itself.
And you don't remember what you talked about when you were under hypnosis?
He would give me suggestions that my anxiety levels would go down, and you would, your life path would work out this way, and there would be a life plan for you.
Right. Well, that's a bit dodgy, isn't it?
Yeah.
The life plan that he's implanting into you.
He used to wait in this big waiting room in his living room, and he lived with his male nurse.
Right.
And the male nurse would walk in this white medical kind of top sweater, and he'd walk in. And he said, "Right, the doctor's ready to see you now." And then you'd go in, and psychiatrist hypnosis, weekly sessions. Yeah.
How long did that go on for?
A few months, maybe a year. My cousin used to see him as well.
Yeah.
Same guy. Yeah.
And who sent you to see him?
I can't remember. My cousin used to have severe anxiety, younger cousin, and he ended up as a pro surfer. He was. Yeah. The guy's like superhuman. He ended up with like no fear and just doing superhuman feats, but yeah.
Anything else about the psychiatrist, or do you think it helped?
No, because my anxiety got worse. And I went more and more off the rails.
Yeah, interesting.